at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. We're actually rolling out a cool new feature, which is quizzes. So we're gonna make an attempt to produce a quiz for each new, or they're sort of lectures in our library that get released on a monthly basis, kind of dripping out that content. And so what we've done is we'll create a quiz for the lecture that comes out that month. So for example, I think we have the one for, I think the January lecture was like a David Anderson lecture, and we've got a David Clavins lecture coming out, stuff like that. And so what'll happen is you watch the lecture and you can take this quiz afterwards. And not only, can it just be kind of a reason to pay attention and get a little bit more engaged in the content, but if you pass the quiz with an 80% passing, and it's usually like a simple quiz, like 10 questions. So just get eight right. That's all we're asking. But you have to do it the first time, right? So you can't just take it multiple times and kind of get it right that way. Then you actually earn PTM points, okay? And those points can be then redeemed once we have like a convention or something like that, or if you want to purchase, we'll specify various items that we have, and you can redeem these points. And the real cool thing is if you subscribe at a higher level, you get more points for the same thing. So like if you're an apprentice, you might get 500 points for passing that quiz, but if you're an artist, if you're a craftsman, you get 1,000. If you're an artisan, you get 1,500, right? So that can correspond to kind of give back, for you being.
It's freezing in Chicago. I guess he didn't get 80%.
Shall we do a chorus of something to wake him up?
Yeah, yeah. God save the Queen.
There we go.
Maybe it was a cyber attack by the Ruskies. Okay, yeah. Hey, Ethan.
We're back, and we're back. Were you guys able to be here when I was visiting another dimension just now?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
good. That's good. So we didn't drop the whole thing. I think my my Wi-Fi hotspot just for some reason kicked off, but we'll be back in a second with full force internet. So anyways, I was just making a little joke, I think, just as we jumped off, that's our minimal way of trying to implement our own sort of token economy in piano technicians master classes that's relatively achievable with a light lift, and kind of reward people who are, participants and loyally participating in the system. So now, all of this to say that was an introduction to where we're at today. I'm also, if the internet's a little bit low still, I'll connect to my other network once it appears in my drop-down list. But when I was talking about Brian Whiten and I was talking about the lecture there, I was thinking of the Send a Piano to Havana guy, and I'm blanking on his name right now.
Ben Truhaft.
Okay, yeah. And I didn't know I was going to ask you, so I thought of him because I don't know if you know this about Ben Truhaft. He's sort of, you ever heard of this book called Humans of New York?
No.
So somebody went around and they created this brand where they basically just take pictures of interesting people on the street in New York, and they'll interview them for a second, and they'll get a little blurb about, who are you, give us your story in a nutshell, and they'll create this book full of kind of interesting faces and people pictures with these little stories about them. And of course, Ben is such a fascinating guy to just even come across. He's in one of those books, and he's got his goatee, which is dyed, like this bright neon yellow color, and he's got his headbands on or whatever. But what he was riding around a tricycle, like an adult-sized tricycle, around the streets of New York. That was his kind of means of transporting around as a piano tuner, and that allowed him not only to have sort of a minimal case, but actually could allow him to have a little bit more, because he had a little basket on the back that could have a substantial amount of equipment. So that's what it made me think of when you said you're riding around on a bike. I'm going to change the internet again, just because I think the signal will be slightly better. So excuse me if I drop off, and I'll be right back. Let's get that set up.
For those of you who don't know, Ben Truhaft is a Berkeley guy. His mother is Jessica Mitford, who wrote a famous book on the American way of dying. And so he's kind of a Berkeley radical from birth. And then he ends up with Send the Piano to Havana and all that sort of thing.
Which was really a cool thing to get to do. I got to go 3 times.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was great.
That's real people-to-people diplomacy, I mean, we can't have too much of that.
I agree. I went to you still there?
Yeah, I think we're all here.
You're still there? Yeah, we're all still here. I went to an honorary thing in the British. Stop.
Keep going.
Oh, at the British Embassy. I was being honored as Co-Woman of the Year, and it was something where you're drinking and you're talking and being translated. And I said, I don't know what that the translator was highly offended by, and he was so angry, he was spitting in my face, and the entire party went silent, just totally silent. And I had visions of having to swim back from Cuba to somewhere in the States. It was freaky. But somehow or other, we got it all resolved. And I still don't know what I said that was so horrendous.
Of course, I'm just cutting in here. Was that a dream or reality that we're talking about?
That was reality. It was a nightmare, but it was reality.
Wow.
And Ben wasn't there. He was in Florida at the time with a group from Havana singing, and I think it was a choral group, a performing group. And so I felt really, really, truly isolated for a while overnight. It was a situation that all resolved, but man alive, in the midst of it, the place where I was staying, Casa de Conciertos, was next to Casa Fina, and someone had escaped from Casa Fina the night before. Then there was a whole parade of footsteps coming up the steps at Casa Fina. I was staying in Casablanca. I was in Casablanca, and here came all these footsteps, and I thought, oh, really and truly, my life's at stake, and what am I going to do? And then they went into whatever room, and there was this rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat, and it turned out to be dominoes on a metal tabletop. They were getting upstairs to play this game as fast as they could. Had nothing to do with me. But once, genuinely freaked about the person I was talking to at the party was the official translator for Fidel, and it's just not someone you want to offend. Just not.
I guess so.
Uh,
Oh. So it's also interesting too. My wife, I just realized, so my wife is building a documentary film about one of the first women filmmakers in Peru, as a matter of fact. And she was a very interesting personality. She's still kicking. And my wife got a chance to interview her and is kind of reassembling the story of her life. She made a couple of, not just a woman filmmaker, but kind of a controversial filmmaker who made films about kind of oppression of indigenous people and things like this that got banned by the government. And she helped co-found one of the earliest film schools for Latin America. And Fidel Castro was part of that process. And Robert Redford, even, from the Sundance Film Festival, was part of this organization. She was friends with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the famous Latin American author. But my wife came across these really incredible photos where she's standing next to Fidel and she's holding her finger up to him like this, like she's scolding him or something, right? Like, and you just get a sense of the kind of chutzpah that this tiny, Latin American Peruvian woman had, So, anyways, it's a tangent. But you said, Carl, that Ben was a Berkeley guy, meaning he was from that area. Is that right?
His mother is Jessica Mitford, who's a Berkeley radical. She wrote a book, The American Way of Dying. And so, he grew up Berkeley.
Got it. And how well do you know him? Like, how much
I
do you
didn't
just know him
know
from
him well.
conventions or something?
He came to Los Angeles once and didn't have any tools and asked if he could borrow some tools for a day. And I gave him some tools for a day. That's the only personal contact I've had with him.
Got it. That sounds like a Ben thing to do. There's a guy that went without shoes for, I think, multiple years, and I actually I tuned a piano in New York, and I visited this guy's house, and he said, yeah, the last guy I had, he didn't want to wear shoes, so I needed a new piano tuner. It was too weird for me, just somebody walking in off the street without any shoes on.
So listen,
I know that guy.
So Ethan, in 1967, I was in Berkeley. I was a super hippie. I had hair down to here, and I didn't wear shoes for 2.5 years. And for 3 months of that, I lived in New York City. And I rode the subways. I went everywhere in New York. My feet were like leather. I didn't wear shoes.
That's incredible. I love it. Yeah. And would you imagine doing that nowadays, though?
Oh, come on!
Would you do it?
I'm a businessman. I'm a piano technician. I mean, oh, God forbid.
Yeah, I feel like there was a point in time where more people would be doing that. More people, like a higher percentage of the population of the planet, aside from, back when nobody had any shoes, there's a higher percentage of people who just thought, let's not do shoes, whatever, it's good. So anyways, I think what I wanted to talk about, we can talk about, we don't have a guest today, but I'm talking again with this guy, Michael Darnton. I just got back in touch with him. We were supposed to have him as a guest a few months ago, actually. We had Danny Kaintop on, who's a guitar maker that's actually local to the Los Angeles area. And so anyways, he learned how to make guitars from this guy, Michael Darnton, who's a pretty well-known violin maker here in the Chicago area where I live. So I just realized, you know, he was going to come on, but, you know, it just didn't work out. Everybody was busy. We didn't end up coming together on a date, but I got back in touch with him. So hopefully we'll get him back on here soon. I think that'll be very interesting. I also don't know whether it will come through or not, but I also thought to reach out to Lyon and Healy. Is everybody here familiar with Lyon and Healy, the harp company? So nowadays, you know, if you go to the Lyon and Healy website, it's harps. You know, it's just harps, and they're pretty top of the line in terms of, you know, who's known as a harp maker in the harp industry. But of course, as probably a lot of us know, you see these Lyon and Healy pianos. So they also used to be quite a prominent piano maker. So I reached out to them. We'll see. I thought it might be interesting to get some connections with them, see if we can get anybody to talk a little bit about the history, and, you know, and also just go into that world, because I find it fascinating, just the connections between different instruments and how they're built and how they're maintained and things like that. So that's something that we're working on as well. And we do have an upcoming session. Actually, I don't remember his name, but we have it on the books, and I got someone on the books for a few weeks from now who should be an interesting guest. I'll look it up. Maybe I can pull it up, and maybe some of you guys know this fellow. I actually haven't met him or seen his work, but he's been an instructor at conventions and seems to have some pretty cool stuff to say. So we can look up for that in the coming weeks. But for today, I thought we'd go back. We'll talk about whatever we like, but we'll go back a little bit to this journey in Latin America in pianos, and I can share a little bit about what I've discovered there, and we'll see where the conversation goes. So let me share my screen, and we'll go a little bit into these blog posts. So last time, you get to see how intense my calendar looks. This is an interesting little excerpt from this time. I'll give a little bit of the background story here, and then we'll go into talking about this piano. And so here I am in this town, which is not small, but it's also not big. It's the third largest city in Peru, and it's known as, or it's called Arequipa. It's both a region, and then there's a town, like a central area that's kind of more urban. And you know, you have Lima, largest, then you have Cusco, the second largest, and then Arequipa comes after that. And so, you know, they've got some relatively large universities in that area. And I started to connect with people, you know, who were through the university. Of course, my wife was working with people at the university as well. And so through that system, became aware of pianos through that. And I don't know if we'll cover it today, but we'll see if we get there. But I'll give a preview because I think it'd be interesting to tell you about. So one of the things I did there was make a connection with this local university and say, hey, you've got some piano students there that, number one, their pianos probably don't get tuned or taken care of as much as they'd like. And number two, they probably have, you know, zero exposure to kind of how a piano works and what's going on there. So I volunteered to go, I think it was 1 or 2 days, and just do a whole day session where I just sat down with the piano students. We took apart the piano. I showed them how the pieces worked and stuff like that. And that turned out to be a really cool idea because they were just super fascinated with it. None of them had any idea of any of this stuff before. And you guys know what it's like. You go to somebody's house and you take out the piano action and they're like, whoa, you know, what's going on? And got to you know, to give that experience to them, which would be even more rare for them to kind of have that access to that information. So I'll just get started in the story as I've written it here, but I'll skip ahead if necessary. So here's where I am. So there's these names that keep popping up in my travels. Certain people are mentioned again and again in various conversations. It's like echoes calling me forward, and if I search long enough, I might find their origins. For example, there's Roque Castillo, a piano tuner I've heard about a few times here and there, but who I've yet to meet. And so basically, you know, of course, you're a piano tuner, you go to the area and you say, are there any other piano tuners around? And that there's like one or two people, I think, you know, really just one. And this is the guy, Roque Castillo, who I just heard about over and over again. And I don't think I go into meeting him in this post, but I definitely get to meet him at some point. That was kind of an interesting moment because of all the people I met as a piano tuner. You would think I would have met him earlier on in the story, but he was kind of like a mysterious, inaccessible character, and it took me actually several months to get in touch with Roque and come together and chat. So there's Roque Castillo, then there's the Lopera sisters, who I was told about at Centro Cultural. Centro Cultural is the American Peruvian Cultural Center. These are very common in Peru, that they have these cultural centers in large cities that connect Peruvian culture with the culture of another country. So they had an American Peruvian Cultural Center, they had a German Peruvian Cultural Center, they had a French, you know, Peruvian Cultural Center. Locals can go there and learn that foreign language. You know, they have events, you know, that celebrate whatever that particular culture is. So then I got integrated into this Centro Cultural, which is the American Peruvian Cultural Center. And again, this is where I was told about the Lopera sisters. And amazingly, I happened upon them by chance at a restaurant. And we had a nice conversation and hoping to connect with the sisters soon to tune her piano. So these were kind of like.
Uh-oh. Does anyone know? I think that a piano tuner in Spanish is afinar de piano, and in French it's accordeur de piano. Does anyone know for sure?
Afinador en español.
Great.
Or afinadora.
Yeah. We can't hear you, Ethan. There's no volume for you, Ethan.
Okay, I'm back. All right, I realized I was probably missed quite a bit. Where somebody tell me where's the last piece of the story I told you about?
The opera sisters.
Can anybody tell me?
The
You're
opera
unmuted,
sisters.
Carl. What's the last thing you heard?
The opera sisters.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Not if
Can
you
you
can
hear me?
Yes. I can't hear Carl for some reason.
You were talking about the opera
What's going on?
sisters.
Let me check. It's too bad. This and this are all set up. Donna, say something.
Can you hear me?
Okay, let me, because I can't
Carl
hear
said
you either.
the opera,
This is weird.
the
Let me
opera sisters.
change the speaker. Same as system. Sound preferences.
The opera sisters, Lopra sisters.
Also, since I think you guys can hear me, I can't hear anybody else, which is fine, so I'll continue in a minute. All right, now I can hear. Now things are going. Okay. I'm getting a new computer. It arrived yesterday, and when I get home, it'll be there, and that'll help with some of these technical difficulties as well. It's a conglomeration of various things today, unfortunately. Okay, so I asked, can somebody tell me where you cut out? Like, what's the last thing you heard?
L'opera sisters.
Okay, the Lopera sisters. Okay, got it. Let's see here. The first time I mentioned them, okay, so the Lopera
Yeah.
sisters were the sort of local, piano stars, right? They're the folks you wanted to talk to if you wanted to meet some great piano players. And I did end up connecting with them eventually. And again, these connections were very interesting how they materialized. It wasn't always the person that mentioned them introducing them. I might just kind of meet them out and have a strange path at meeting people. So I just started to talk about Gabriel Rios. He's actually a piano student of one of the Lopera sisters, and he's kind of like this local guy. He's a student at La UNSA, who I mentioned, that university. But he plays jazz, he plays popular music, he plays piano. Unfortunately, he doesn't really know a lot about acoustic piano because I think mostly he played keyboards. But a super nice guy, super supportive and interesting, and a great person to connect with because there weren't a lot of like local jazz, music players too. Okay, so anyways, the La UNSA, to reiterate, it's a public university, one of the few music departments in the area. Other schools have some serious music study, but not that many, maybe a couple. And when I first arrived in Peru, as I mentioned, I thought it'd be interesting to get involved in universities and maybe to teach a class or connect with some students, but I wasn't sure how that would happen. And through Gabriel and another person named Hugo, we started to get the wheels in motion. And these photos that you're seeing here so far are pictures of La UNSA in the department where they do art and music. So you're seeing like paintings and things like that, and paintings of music, musical stuff. So Gabriel was the first person I met at La UNSA. And funnily enough, I didn't reach him through the Lopera sisters. I met him because my wife went out salsa dancing one night and she met him out doing the salsa dancing and found out he played jazz piano and then connected the two of us. And he and I met at the university. We played a little piano together, had lunch, talked about a potential class that I might teach. Now there was a problem. I love this picture, by the way, guys. This is really just, I really thought this is some really cool art that just came out of the university there. Talented folks. So anyways, problem started to materialize, and it was a rainy season. So in this area of the world in Peru, it's a desert climate. It's very hot during the day in the dry season. Gets cold at night though because it's a desert climate and there's nothing to hold the heat. But then for a little bit of the year, a few months, you get a lot of rain. And during this season, it rains lightly for a couple hours each day. You can just kind of expect it. And around January or February, many people actually leave town for extended holiday. They go to like the beach towns or something like that. And it took me some time to understand what this means. And this means that emails stop getting returned, plans come to a halt, people travel. Gabriel was heading to Lima to do some gigging and networking for a few months. And so even though we started to talk about me doing some things at the university, like everything just like, dematerialized. You couldn't get in touch with anybody. And you'll find that, in various countries have their own culture around communications and time. And this is one of those circumstances where it was just misaligned with what I was used to in the United States. So when I went to see Gabriel again, he arranged for me to meet with this guy named Hugo Cueto. And Hugo ran the music department at La Unsa. And Hugo's was another name that people have been mentioning. And my friends at El Centro Cultural, the American Peruvian Cultural Center, had also recommended I contact him. So had the Lopera sisters. So you hear these names a lot of people talk about, starts focusing in on. And I talked to him about my desire to do, this never happened. I might have mentioned it before, like kind of do a major piano rebuilding project in Peru. But that never materialized. I told him about that idea, and he said he had an idea, and I sent Gabrielle and I to take a look at a potential piano. Oh, so this piano we're going to look at was a potential piano to do a rebuilding on. So here's me, here's Hugo Cueto, and now as a little side story, which I think you guys might find interesting. Here's a guy named Nelson. On the way to look at the piano that was a potential kind of rebuilding opportunity, Gabrielle and I were walking in this plaza, and we heard something that stopped us both. It was jazz music playing in the plaza. And again, I was excited. I knew where it was coming from. The music was very familiar, but again, you didn't hear a lot of jazz on that. And weeks before, I'd come through this area and heard the music of John Coltrane. Again, not something you typically hear around here. Following the echoes, I found this man dressed in snazzy clothing, playing music and offering a cup for donations, tossed a few coins, but had to rush off and hoped I would see him again. And, in this day, Gabrielle and I ran into him. And his name is Nelson. He's actually from Guyana, Africa, if you can imagine. You look at this guy, and he's just kind of like on the street. He looks like just kind of like just maybe like a local person who, you wouldn't imagine he came from someplace else, because he doesn't look like, he looks like maybe he's like a poor person, like just kind of hanging out on the street. He just came from a local area, couldn't find the means to do anything, so he just ends up like on the street asking for donations and things like this. So it turned out he's actually from Guyana, Africa. He lost his eyesight, but he still wanted to journey the globe. And so this is what he did. He went ahead and he made it happen. He even though he couldn't see, right, and he was from Guyana, Africa, he wanted to kind of travel the world, and he found a way to make it happen. And so I loved how he took on this ambition that people without a handicap might already be intimidated by. So I actually just met a guy last night. He was letting people in the hotel, checking your vaccination cards. And he said, I just finally, he's probably like 28 or something. I just finally took a trip out of state, and I'd like to start traveling more. So you get, just an example of how hard it is for the average person to get around and about and travel. So he collects money just in exchange for sharing his recordings of John Coltrane, Martin Luther King speeches, and other sound artifacts in the streets. He also writes poetry and sells it in booklets that he has published in several different languages. And he also speaks several different languages. So now I was stumbling upon him for the third time, Gabrielle at my side. I introduced these two fellow jazz lovers and was happy once again to see the connections formed through music. So here we get to this piano. I love the architecture, and the piano itself, of course, is really interesting. So what was really surprising, I didn't tell this part of the story, but there was another moment in my journey where I met this guy named Marcus du Sautoy. And I think Carl, and others might find this guy interesting. He's a guy that does studies in the intersection between math and science, math and arts, and science and the arts. And so he writes about like music and math and all this stuff. And he had given a lecture at this cultural festival. I think he's from the UK or something like that. And I think he was with Cambridge. They have a special title for someone to communicate, science to the public. And Richard Dawkins had held that title, and I think he was the person that took it up after Richard Dawkins. So, he ended up at this thing called the Hay Festival in Arequipa. I met him. One of the really cool advantages, and I'll tell us, if I get a chance, I'll tell a story in more detail later. One of the cool advantages of being in this kind of isolated region is, and being, I guess I would say if this guy, Marcus du Sautoy, had come to New York City to give a talk, I never would have met the guy, because it would just be a big city thing. There'd be a million people trying to hang out with him and meet him and ask him questions. But he had come to this kind of small or less accessible area in Peru for this special cultural festival, and he and I got to hang out and talk and sort of exchange ideas and stuff like that. So anyways, this was the room that he gave a lecture in. And the piano that we were talking about was a Rhenish piano. And it's the same make that my friend Jose has, which I haven't talked about either. And this brand, Rhenish, maybe we went over it together. It's relatively common in Peru compared to what I've seen in the United States. A German brand. There appear to be a lot of connections between Germany and Peru. And you see a lot of Rhenish pianos, and a lot of times they're just these beautiful, vintage instruments. You can see this one has just a really cool, wood grain design, and it's ornate, very unique. Inside of it, we found a sticker on the action with a new name, Nicholas Reynoso, another mystery to pursue. Now, I never met that person, but at the time I didn't know whether I would or not. So you can see this piano in more detail. Really cool. It has this beautiful inlay on the sides of it. Maybe I can open the image in a bigger window so you guys can see it. I'll let that load up. Let's see here. Yeah, we may or may not get that loaded. I'll move on to the next part of the story. I'm curious if any of you have, maybe we brought this up before, but if any of you have worked on Rhenish pianos, if anybody knows much about the brand. But from the, just from the look of it, right, they're taking this pretty seriously. So it's seems to be a pretty reputable piano brand from days of, at least days of old. So before departing from La UNSA, I spoke with the Hugo about the possibility of teaching in the class. He was open to it. And he said we should set one up for the end of that week. And he'd round up some students. And if it went well, maybe we'd do some more. So, and here it is. I guess we did get a moment where I get to show how this went down. So I gathered with these students for about 8 hours. We opened up a piano and I showed them how to tune notes, how to handle a piano hammer, and how the mechanics of the keys and the action work. You guys still reading me? You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Good, okay. So there's me. There's an upright piano that we had. And so, yeah, this was just like, I just love moments like this because, again, I think in the States, this would be interesting and fun for, students, I'm sure. But I can also imagine them being interested in other things and kind of like, but in this place where it's so under accessed and you would really, really rarely have the opportunity, these kids were just fascinated, and they were all just like awestruck by the whole process. You can see the way she's picking up a key and, it's like you're taking apart a human cadaver. Like, oh, wow, like, look at how this works, So really cool stuff. So we talked about how understanding the inner workings of a piano can not only help you care for your instrument, can make you a better piano player. I took time to explain to them, oh yeah, why is it that this key might not work? How can you approach playing the piano if it's in a state like, if it's got sticky keys, is there a better approach to like how you play it so you can get the sound out that you want despite of the problems, things like that. Let's give them some ideas about how if you understand how it works, sometimes you can actually get more performance out of the piano, even if you're in a difficult situation. At least that's the way I feel. So I asked them if they'd be interested in collaborating with me on a project or two. They said they were, and it all went so well that I came back for a second session. So I think I did just 2 sessions with these guys, but I did do 2. And I am so proud of myself because the biggest challenge was the language. And so my Spanish was still, so this was all in Spanish. The students were very understanding and they were helping me improve. And so it's actually interesting trying to teach in Spanish about piano parts, right? Because we all have very technical terms for the piano parts in English. And so then I would explain what it was, and they would tell me what the Spanish word was for that thing. But I'd kind of be like, is that the official Spanish word, or is this the like made up word that we all came up with? So for example, I think it's like felt is called spuma, I believe, right? Something like this. But it's all that also means like foam or something, right? So I would talk about let's the martillo is a hammer, right? And the spuma of the martillo, and we would try to have these conversations about things. And I was actually really surprised at how well we could communicate around things. The keys are called clave. I think they're called claves or tecladoras, maybe. Yeah. So anyways, we would just go back and forth and we would get a common vocabulary. We would talk about these things, and like I said, it went surprisingly well. And that's just kind of like a summary of what happened with those students. I do have some more pictures which are really cool. Maybe they're in another post, but you can, like I got these cool pictures where you've got like a what is it? A whipping, right? We're like holding up a whipping, and you see this kid's face like looking at it in awe, and it's really fun. So that's kind of that segment about those piano students and the pianos. But I guess I'll give you this. I guess I'll give you this non-piano little anecdote to finish off this one. So the elusive Mazamorra, Gabriel, a wonderful and enthusiastic musical guide here in Arequipa. In addition, we developed a ritual of eating together whenever we would meet. And after he and I visited the piano that Hugo sent us to, we went to eat at Ratatouille, a French restaurant that they established in Peru that we really enjoy. Really good food, really good lunch specials. By the way, guys, you could get this amazing lunch special for like $3, right? It would be silly to cook for yourself because it was so affordable. It's run by 2 kind and passionate young men, one named Mikael, the Frenchman, and Anwar, the Peruvian. They have a fantastic lunch special, creates long lines of hungry patrons. There's also a dog who wanders over there's a tattoo shop in the same little enclave where the restaurant is, and he begs for some toothsome French cuisine. So, and nobody like cares, right? They're just like, the dog's there. We're not gonna try to make him go away. He's gonna come to your table and he's gonna beg for some food. So this is that dog. So now Gabriel has been going out of his way to introduce me to new types of Peruvian foods. And this time, as we finished our French Peruvian lunch, he said I must try mazamorro. It's a dark, sweet pudding made from purple corn and served with arroz con leche. And much like the people whose names echo from the corners of Arequipa, it turned to be pretty hard to hunt down. So even though it's like this signature Peruvian dish, for some reason you wouldn't find it at a lot of you wouldn't find it at just any Peruvian eatery. So we walked from restaurant to cafe, stopping to ask people where we should go. everyone knew the name of the characteristic Peruvian dish and kept insisting, just head the next block down and there'll be a place, and you can get it. Each stop, we continued to strike out, but we were very persistent. And finally, just about before we were about to give up, we managed to find the mazamorro. It was delicious, worth all the searching. And I'm so surprised the echoes continue to rebind, calling me towards these unique and enriching adventures. Gosh, I thought I might have a picture of it. It's really cool. I'm determined to find the source of many. I become sure with each passing through there are treasures that await if I point myself in the right direction. But it's a little bit more about the mazamorro. Like, is anybody familiar with, what is it called? Chicha morada. It's a Peruvian drink. And so in Peru, they have all these different types of corn. They have so many types of corn you can't even imagine. And potatoes. All these different types of potatoes you wouldn't even believe exist. And they all have different shapes and colors and characteristics, and you can put them in different types of dishes, use them for different purposes. So purple corn is this type of corn that is used in various things in Peru, and it's not just like your normal corn in the US, but purple. It's a different type of corn. The kernels are usually a little bit larger, and they use it kind of to make what I would call like a Peruvian Kool-Aid, or they use it to make a Peruvian alcoholic beverage. And actually, the way that they made the original alcoholic beverage is fascinating, because they would chew this purple corn, spit it into like something, and then kind of let it ferment, right? So it's a kind of weird how they make it, but it's the very traditional old world thing. That's a chicha that you drink. But then there's chicha morada, which is just you cook that purple corn in boiling water. You add some cinnamon and some clove and some sugar, and you get this purple kind of Kool-Aid-y type drink, and you drink that. And then mazamorro is that I don't know exactly how they do it. I think they might use like cornstarch or some other type of something to make it thicker, and it turns it into this like purple goo. It's very sugary and sweet and yummy. And then you put that on top of the rice, basically the arroz con leche. It's kind of like a rice pudding type of stuff, and it all goes together. It's really yummy. So
Sort of like a creme brulee.
It's kind of like a custard. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit less like creme brulee, just because creme brulee has that kind of like smooth custardy, because this has like chunks of rice in it. But yeah, that's very good. So anyways, there's another episode in those global adventures in pianos. Did anybody say they had any contact with I know you, I saw you nodding no, Carl. You haven't heard of Rhenish piano, or have you heard of Rhenish?
No, I've never seen one.
What about you, Johan? Have you heard of Rhenish pianos?
Open my microphone. Rhenish, it's an East German brand.
Okay.
And it may be connected with the petrol factory, or one of those, August Förster, one of them makes, or it may be just independent.
Okay.
I don't remember that. But East Germany had a great connection because of the Russian occupation, perhaps, to Latin America. And many pianos bent down to that continent, and that's all I know about it. But it's a pretty good piano, actually.
Yeah, it seems like it is. Anybody else have any experience with that? Yeah, I don't know who this is. It just says hi ho silver away. What's
This is Richard
your real name?
Cat
Oh, hey, how's it going, Richard?
in Boulder.
Cool.
I've had a Rhenish piano here in the area that I've tuned several times. But
Cool.
I
How's the
didn't know
quality
anything
of
about
it?
the history, but I've seen them.
Is it a nice piano like the one that you have around there, or is it pretty high
Yes,
quality?
it's an old one, early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it's obviously was a well-made, well-designed piano. So yeah,
Cool.
It was nice.
Nice. Yeah, I can imagine collecting a few of those, I feel like you could do some interesting stuff with them, just like you could restore an old Steinway or something if it had fallen out of disrepair. It seems like you got quite a bit to work with, I think, when you discover those old Rhenish pianos. Either they're in relatively good shape to start with, or could potentially be revived relatively easily because you have some pretty good bones on those things. So anyways, that can be pretty much it for our episode today. Hope you enjoyed that session. As I said, I'm working on some other guests coming up. If anybody has any recommendations, let us know. There was an idea on the books about integrating with, I forget who mentioned integrating with the PTG more. I did talk a little bit with someone from the PTG. We had an idea, and for some reason it didn't materialize, maybe just because I didn't have enough bandwidth. I think we could still implement it if we just try to do it independently. So I'll put it in front of all you guys and we can decide whether to do it. But, people go and they write articles for the PTG journal. And the idea was it's an interesting opportunity to say, hey, you just wrote an article for the PTG journal. Would you like to join us and kind of go over the concepts in the class? So I guess what I would say to help facilitate that for us in the group is, if you do find an interesting article, at least that you see in the journal, say, oh, hey, look, I found this, Ethan, check it out. Let's reach out, or you can certainly reach out directly with this idea. And and to be honest, we don't typically compensate guests for radio hour. We do it for our master classes, but we don't typically do it for radio hour. But I think we just discussed it with the PTG, because I think people get compensated for their articles in some way for the journal. So we could probably put something together to make it, put a little sweeten the deal a little bit. So anyways, if you know any articles that you'd love a little bit of a background story, a little bit of a deeper dive, bring it to my attention, reach out to me or that author, and we'll see if we can set up something like that. I think that's at least a pretty good idea that came out of these collaborative discussions. All right, folks, any last words before we part today? Awesome. Okay, yep, great to see you all. Thanks, Carl, for joining, and John, and was it Richard?
Hi, all.
Hi-Ho Silver. All right, catch
Happy
you guys
trail.
later.